You're listening to Radio Kidnappers, the voice of Hawke's Bay. This is a program called
The Wonderful World of Wardini Books.
And as always, it's our pleasure to have in the studio the wonderful Lou from Wardini Books in Havelock North. How are you going?
Very well, actually, yeah. How are you going?
Oh, a box of birds, all the better for seeing you. You know that. As we speak, like a spring day. It is a spring day.
It's a beautiful spring day. It smells like it and it looks like it and it is it.
Makes you feel like being out there amongst it, doesn't it?
A little bit.
What about that wind last night? Did you get wind?
Yeah, it was a howler.
Crikey, it was awful.
Well, I suppose that is springish though, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit unsettled.
The equinox or something, isn't it? Something like that. I don't know.
Science.
I just made it up.
Weather, science.
Yeah. Three great books today to look at. Before we get to them, just remind our listeners where Wardini Books is.
We are 16 Tomato Road in Havelock North and 44 Hastings Street, Napier.
Yes, you are. 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And you're everywhere. You're on the net. You're all over the place.
Yeah.
Ernie and the Magic Kennel. Tell us about it.
Picture book for small children of probably about 3 and up. You could go a bit younger. It always depends on the child of that age,
Indeed.
doesn't it, if they can sit or not. But this one, Ernie is a corgi, and I quite like that he is described such. Ernie is a corgi. He has a shiny crown, a fluffy bum and furry tongue not far off the ground. So that's Ernie, and he lives in a little castle in the garden at his home. And then we have Benny. And Benny couldn't be more different. Benny is a street dog. He doesn't have a home, one ear up, one ear down. He loves to run and roam. So he's looking for a forever family, really.
I love his bandana.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
he's lovely.
cool,
He looks like
it?
a bit of a rapscallion
Yes.
street dog. He's going to have that ice cream because that's all he's got to eat. And I'll just point out that the illustrations by Kimberly Andrews are peopled with cats and dogs, so that we won't find actual people until later on. So this is by, actually, I should have mentioned this, Robert Rackerty and Jeanette Thomas, and they are presenters on The Breeze.
Yes, sir. I'm very famous.
Yeah, and I shall tell you more about that and why they've written this book in a little bit. So the premise of the story is that this golden ticket comes wafting in just as Benny is passing Ernie's home, so they meet. And the thing about the golden ticket is... adventures start right here. This kennel's full of magic. In this you'll fly up in the sky, you leave tonight. I missed a line out so it doesn't rhyme properly. But the basic idea is that the Queen of England has given 5 dogs the chance to go and meet her at the palace. So Benny hops in there, and then they've got instructions on how to find the other dogs. So they have to go off to Aussie and they find a dog called Blue who says, "G'day, mate," and off they go.
Yes.
And then they go, there he is, look.
Look at that.
At Uluru.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And then they go off to Switzerland to meet a St Bernard, and off they go with him. He's Ace. And then they go to Gay Paris, and I quite like all the dogs that are wandering about because it's the city of romance, so they're little canoodling dogs.
There, look at that. Oh,
Yes.
Fifi.
And they find Fleur, and eventually they get to meet Queenie, Elizabeth, and off they go. But Benny wasn't on the list of dogs that were actually invited, so he slinks off like that,
Oh, no.
and feels all sad
That's sad.
about everything. But the Queen's very kind, of course, and says, "Come now, Benny, don't be sad. Home's more than a family tree. It's anyone who loves someone, for love is family." And he's like, "Well, I don't even know one of those either." And he says, "I'm going home." And then he goes, "I'm coming home too, because I love you, and you could be my family."
Oh, how nice.
I know, and they live happily
Look
ever
at that.
after, and it's just so lovely. But it's based, Ken, this is the best bit, it's based on the real Ernie and Benny.
Oh, look at that.
So, Ernie is a tricolour Pembroke Welsh Corgi, and he's the Chief Happiness Officer at The Breeze, and this is my favourite bit, where his favourite hobbies are going on beach adventures, foraging in tall grass, and playing with his fellow log-shaped friends. Ernie can hear the word cheese 3 houses away. And Benny was a stray pup, and Jeanette's family adopted him when he was 4 months old, and my favourite bit of that is he wasn't going to be allowed on the couches or the beds, but that rule only lasted half an hour, because that's about what
So
happened
true,
in my
isn't it?
house.
Exactly.
But they're donating the profits from this book. Jeanette's donating hers to the Saving Hope Foundation, and Robert is donating his to the Duffy Books and Homes Foundation.
Good causes.
So it's actually cool on many, many levels.
Very good book.
It's a good fun book, isn't
And it's
it?
got a moral in there as well.
What's the moral, Ken?
It's be nice to people. Have
Be
a
nice to
family.
people.
It's all about love,
Family's
isn't it?
more than blood, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And if there is such a thing as reincarnation, I am going to come back as a dog in our house.
In your yes.
Yes. It's very well treated.
Very well
dogs.
looked after. Yeah.
Our next book is called Here is the Beehive, not the Beehive that we know in Wellington.
No, because Sarah Crossan is an Irish writer. She may well have visited the Beehive, I don't know, but this is a different Beehive, it's a buzzy one. So Sarah Crossan writes in verse, she writes like that. So it's not and then. She writes mostly for young adults, and it's really accessible because it's kind of like poetry but not. And so every single word is chosen carefully to be in the right place and have pack as much meaning as it possibly can. So it's a really interesting way of writing.
So does that make it easier to read?
It does, because it's quicker. It's more accessible, and you've cut out all that sort of, let's walk through this forest for half an hour.
Yeah.
It's all, this one particularly is all about people and exactly what's going on and the drama with the people. So in this one, which is her first adult novel, we have Anna, who is a lawyer, and she is sorting out the estate of a man who has died, and Rebecca, his wife, is becoming more reliant on Anna by the day to help out the sorting out of the estate. But what Rebecca doesn't realise is that Anna was having an affair with the husband, who has now died. And this is how Anna finds out about the death, is when Rebecca rings her and says, my husband's died, I need you to sort out the estate. And she's like, but can't say anything, because
indeed.
it's the only one of the guy's friends knew, and that's it. So it's been the biggest secret of her life. And as we go through the novel, we realise that you don't really like Anna very much. She is so involved in her grief, and she was so involved with her love. And you find out things about her. I mean, she's married too, but you don't find that out for quite a long time, because she doesn't even acknowledge her husband, Paul, in her life at all. Like in her inner life and in her thoughts, he's not there.
It's almost a chattel.
Yeah. He's just something that's happened to her. And she's not thinking about him. All she's thinking about is, and I'm sure I do know, I keep calling him the dead guy, and that's terrible, isn't it? But I've forgotten, I'm terrible with names. I can remember everything else about the story. So we'll continue to call him the dead guy. So she's just focused completely on him and how she can't grieve properly. So she goes to the funeral and tries to keep herself out of the way. And watch, and Rebecca she didn't understand him, and she wasn't a good wife, and all the things that this guy's probably fed her to continue their affair. She wanted him to leave Rebecca. She was prepared to leave her husband and run away and start again, but he never was. So he kind of strung her along, and as the novel progresses, you realise that he wasn't the sweet and innocent one either.
He was having his cake and wanted to eat it as well.
Yes, exactly. And so she becomes, to keep him in her life after his death, she almost becomes obsessed with Rebecca and insinuates herself further and further into her life. And there were children in that home.
Sounds like that movie, doesn't it?
Single white female.
Yes, that's the one. The bunny baller.
Yeah, that was Fatal Attraction, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's got elements of that kind of behaviour in it, not quite that extreme. So it is just a fascinating look at the way people's minds work when they are doing things that are completely immoral, and how they can convince themselves or become obsessed, by things and by other people. And it was quite fascinating. Yeah.
Good read?
Yeah, it was a really good read. Yeah.
Out of 10, what would you give it?
Well, I just sat and read and read and read and read. It's one of those ones that you don't want to put down, and you're horrified by Anna, but you've got to keep reading. Some people might not dislike her as much as I did.
Who's it going to appeal to?
I think people that have read Sally Rooney's Conversations with Friends, and they like those books that are real sort of insights into people's inner lives and relationships, and how one person can think that this is going on in a relationship, but the person they think it about has a completely different perception of it. That really interesting psychological look at relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and the last book we're going to look at today is called A Tree of Strangers,
by Barbara Sumner, who is a Napier lady. And she has had one heck of a life. So this is a non-fiction. And if truth could ever be stranger than fiction, this is it. So this is her story of adoption. So she was adopted. And back in the day, I'm learning things that I didn't know about the laws and the regulations in New Zealand. So on her birth certificate were the names of her adoptive parents. And it was a closed adoption. So she was never allowed to know the name that she'd been given at birth, or who her parents were.
How sad.
So Mavis and Max were, to all intents and purposes, her parents, although not her biological parents. And they didn't like any talk about, you're our child, it doesn't,
Yes.
So from Barbara's perspective, she was taken from her mother, and it turns out she actually really, really was. This young woman who's her mother is sent to the doctor in Napier, and she will clean and, earn her keep while she's pregnant, and then she will have the baby, and this doctor will deliver it, and then he will immediately give it to somebody else. So there's the most immense trauma there. And Barbara describes this trauma in many ways, but she's got this sort of obsessive behaviour when she's in the bath, and it is, very clearly like an amniotic fluid. And her first husband, Bruce, with whom she has 3 children by the time she's 23, she's got 3 kids under 3. And she's living out in the wops in the middle of nowhere down south. And Bruce is very worried because she disappears in the bath and he thinks she's trying to drown herself all the time, but she's just trying to make sense of this feeling that she's got. And she does eventually track down her mother, and I won't spoil too much because even though it's non-fiction and obviously, the facts are out there,
Yes.
the things that happen to Barbara in her journey and her search for her mother are quite incredible.
Incredible good or incredible bad?
Well, I've never, having met her, as I have
Yes.
lots of times before, I knew nothing of her history. And I'm just in awe of the fact that she's wandering around and looks like a together person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it reads like the most incredible novel, but this is her life, and she's incredibly frank, and she is, by dint of just writing that book, advocating for the people who have had similar experiences and need to find out who they are.
As you read the book, does it get better? I mean, when I say not as in it's a bad book, but do you feel better the deeper you get into it? Do you think, oh, this is going to have a happy ending, or do you think,
She carves an incredible life for herself. Yeah, I mean, she has a rocky childhood and particularly her adolescence. As anybody's adolescence is quite difficult, but because of the situation that she's in, it's really quite hard. And so she leaves home too young, and she gets in with people that she shouldn't have trusted, and things happen to her that would send anybody off the rails.
Yeah.
But the fact that she then becomes she's a successful writer and filmmaker, and that all these things racked up to create the person she is now is incredible.
Obviously a good read.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah.
All right, that's our lot for today. We want any of these 3 great books. Where do we get them?
Please come to Wardini Books. We would love to see you. Yes.
Good on you, Lou. Pleasure as always. You look after yourself. Talk to you same time, same place next time.
Thank you, Ken.